Hello everyone, my name is Laura Clancy and I'm a lecturer in media at Lancaster University. The material I'm going to present to you today about Poundbury is part of a larger research project that I've undertaken, which is concerned very broadly with the cultural, political economy of the contemporary British monarchy and the ways in which it is represented in media culture to reproduce and sustain its power against its political and economic functions. And this will be published next year by Manchester University Press. So Poundbury is a 400-acre urban extension to the town of Dorchester in Dorset, in England, built using the architectural principles set out by Prince Charles in his book A Vision of Britain, which was published in 1989. And Charles's vision fundamentally rejects the modernism characterising the 20th century, and Poundbury regenerates a conservative and neoclassical blend of what Charles calls familiar, traditional, well-tried and beautiful architectural styles. So he says, for example, that our own heritage of regional styles and individual characteristics has been eaten away by this creeping cancer, and is referring here to modernist architecture. Charles appears to envisage himself as a social, cultural and/or political commentator. Charles's interest in town planning is distinctly politicised, and he links architectural trends to social and cultural figurations. As I will demonstrate in this paper, his vision of Britain is concerned not only with the technicalities of architecture, but also with the management of the citizens populating it. And Poundbury can be read as an experimental place where all of Charles's infamous concerns and attempted interventions play out in material form. They all reflect a shared yearning for a past lost to urban modernity, best summarised in a speech he made in 2002, as you can see on your screen. So there's an assumption here that there is something to be healed by a return to a pastoral past, and that Charles himself has been granted this role of shepherding a process of return. However, if we read Poundbury in socio-political context, this periodisation of what he calls decline cannot be circumvented from post-war economic migration into Britain from former colonies, the decline of empire and the crafting of the welfare state. Indeed, as I will suggest, Charles's vision is less concerned with the architectural impact of the 1950s and 60s, and more concerned with the social, cultural, political and economic changes which saw traditional class hierarchies being dismantled. So as I've said, Poundbury is an extension to the town of Dorchester, which is in southwest England, as I've pictured here on the left. And you can see on the right, I've highlighted Poundbury and where it is in relation to the town itself. So Poundbury is built on land that is owned by the Duchy of Cornwall, which is hereditarily owned by male heirs to the throne, and they are entitled to the annual net revenue surplus of the duchy to fund their private and public duties. In 2016-17, Charles received £20.7 million. The duchy agreed to release the land to Dorchester Council for Development after an affordable housing crisis on the agreement that Charles could be involved with the design. The images in this presentation that you'll see coming up are from my own visit to Poundbury in July 2017, where I employed walking methodology, photography, field note-taking and a collection of publicity materials. So some of this is documented through my own feelings as I travelled around the town. #LovePoundbury is a hashtag and group on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. The Instagram feed consists primarily of lifestyle images from Poundbury businesses, for example, antique shop Romans and artisan pizzas from the engine room. The Facebook group shares local news, events and facilitates participation through discussion and comment. #LovePoundbury is the result of a promotional campaign by the Poundbury Residents Association, a committee of residents representing the community in order to facilitate a specific Poundbury identity. #LovePoundbury reflects the ways in which Charles's vision is not merely architectural, but concerned also with manufacturing the citizenry. This type of social engineering was central to 19th century model villages, which were self-contained communities built by landowners and industrialists to house their workers. This began with model villages built by landlords of large estates, through to more famous examples of liberal industrialists, such as Salt Air, built by woolen manufacturer Titus Salt, and Bourneville, built by the chocolate proprietor George Cadbury. These philanthropic developments aim to improve working class living standards, but also re-establish class hierarchies between owner and worker, and gave wealthy elites control over their workers' lifestyles, such as Cadbury's imposition of a physical fitness regime on his residents. In Poundbury, social engineering is exercised through the Poundbury Code, which are rules and stipulations issued to all residents which regulates their use of the built environment. This demands no exterior alterations to properties, no caravan parking, no visible repairing of motor vehicles, no removing of pre-planted shrubbery, no displaying of advertisements or placards, and no visible television aerials, clothes dryers or dustbins. Social engineering can also be evidenced structurally through design decisions that privileged an older or middle-aged and upper and middle-class residents. Almost all of the shops are independent boutiques rather than chain stores, which has proved useful in fostering the idea of a unique community, but arguably works to compound class relations, whereby those requiring cheaper own brand goods are neglected. These management and design decisions evidence how pre-industrial aesthetics are frequently prioritised over creating a livable, modern, functional environment, and many features are entirely impractical. Walkways lined with gravel obstruct prams and wheelchairs, parks do not provide dog waste bins, the lack of road markings means parked cars clog the streets, and decorative pillars outside buildings have allegedly caused accidents, as you can see at the bottom here. Facade is also central to Poundbury, and the appearance of historical simplicity often merely masks messier realities. So, for example, the nostalgic peristyle of Poundbury Village stores that you can see on the left actually houses a branch of the food store chain Budgeon's, and an electricity substation is disguised as a Greek temple. One of A Vision of Britain's principal concerns is the hierarchical relation of buildings in terms of height and embellishment. For Charles, this is not merely symbolic, but rather architecture is, as he writes, the physical representation of our values as well as our social organisations. This is interesting in relation to Poundbury's Queen Mother Square, which is dominated by references to past and present royals, particularly symbolic considering that this is the primary centre of Poundbury with the largest buildings. King's Point House is the largest building in Poundbury, and it houses a Waitrose, which is in itself a class statement because of Waitrose's luxury status. This sits next to the Royal Pavilion, which will comprise luxury apartments when completed, and the tower on top of this dominates the surrounding skyline. Strathmore House, which is more luxury flats and named after the Queen Mother's father, the Earl of Strathmore, is the most visually imposing building on the square, modelled on Buckingham Palace, which you can see on the top left. Next is the Duchess of Cornwall Inn, which is on the right, modelled on London's luxurious Ritz Hotel, and the square is completed with a statue of the Queen Mother. If architecture is symbolic of wider social values, royalty's position at the centre of Poundbury can be interpreted as Charles considering royalty at the centre of Britain. Modernism is the physical embodiment of everything that counters hereditary hierarchical privilege. It evokes a socialist sensibility, expressing the industrial means of production. This means making visible relations of production, so no hidden vestibules or staircases for servants, as was popular in Victorian architecture. This threatens Charles's investment in the maintenance of a traditional class system. Charles positions modernist architecture as a post-war phenomenon, and in line with his presumption that the 1950s and 60s is when, quote, something went wrong. This is not quite accurate, and modernism has been used since at least the earlier 20th century. It is true, however, that post-war housing regeneration triggered a rush of modernist building projects, and this is entirely connected to the post-war welfare state. John Grindrod argues against the demonisation of the concrete tower blocks characterising this period, and he argues that for many these symbolise an escape from the damp and the dysentery of inner city slums. So this reflects Charles's fundamental and perhaps willful misunderstanding of the political symbolism of post-war architecture. He entirely overlooks the working or middle classes actually welcoming modernism, and his anti-modernist regeneration is presented as philanthropic development without ever consulting the inhabitants. In conclusion, it's important to point out that there has been criticism of Poundbury, both from the commentators I've cited in this paper and in more overt protest, such as this road sign which is vandalised so the direction reads "ugly buildings." It is a very strange place to be. Simulation and pastiche have been recurring themes in this paper, and the description of Poundbury as Disneyland is perhaps the most poignant. So Poundbury bears a lot of resemblance to the neo-urbanist Celebration in Florida, which is a futuristic model town built by Walt Disney that also actually recreates the past, as you can see on the top left. Poundbury is a space in which feudalist, imperialist, hierarchical, conservative with both a big and a little c, nostalgic conceptions of Little England play out in a picturesque setting. It is a space where Charles is permitted to play with residents, manufacturing communities who live out his ideologies and utopias. It is only by reading Poundbury in this context of class, social development, and royalty, and in the extended version of this in the chapter in my book, I talk about empire and race too, that we can see the meanings that the space produces and displays. Thank you for listening.